Hi everyone, welcome back to another video on ethical theories where we will examine some examples of normative ethical theories. So if you recall in the previous video, we had discussed that there were two groups of normative ethical theories. Those that focuses on the motivation and intention of our actions, we call them non-consequentialist theories. Then there are those theories that looks at the outcome or the impact of our actions, and these were called consequentialist theories. So let's first start by looking at consequentialist theories. Let's start by looking at utilitarianism. Let's start by looking at consequentialist theories. Let's first look at utilitarianism. What utilitarianism says is that we should act in ways that produce the most pleasure and happiness for the most number or the greatest number of people that are affected by our actions. So in other words, it's a theory that is based on the utility of our actions. And how we are supposed to measure that utility is looking at the pleasure it creates or the happiness it creates in the other group of people, the people that are affected by our actions. And this has a cost beneficial evaluation approach, somewhat like what we do in the accounting profession. We like to evaluate causes of action that is based on the costs we put in and what are the benefits or the lowest cost possible as a result of that business action. Now, so if I give you a couple of examples, so if we look at a company and says that if I employ underage children, I don't have to pay them so much, right? But it's fine because I can create products that are cheaper and at a lower cost, and therefore more of my customers are able to enjoy the product that is being produced. So if you evaluate based on a utilitarianism perspective, you may arrive at the conclusion that it's not so bad to actually hire young people because it saves you cost and you are making the impact of your behavior is maximized because more people can enjoy your products. Another example of something that may be approached using utilitarianism is I want to produce a product or a skin or cosmetic product that is safe for my customers. So in order to ensure its safety, I want to test it out in a safe manner with the least damage to human beings. So I test it out on animals. And that's where a lot of cosmetic companies and all that have been testing on animals, monkeys, and all that. So all these decisions may have been arrived based on utilitarianism. So there are some weakness in utilitarianism, of course, is the subjectivity in the sense that who are we looking at in terms of evaluating the pleasure and the happiness, right? So obviously in these two examples, we are looking at our customers. If we are not really looking at the child, we are not looking at the pleasure and happiness of the animals that we are testing on. The other thing that are somewhat a weakness in utilitarianism is how do we then measure pleasure and happiness? So in these two examples that I've given you, we are probably measuring it based on the benefit in terms of revenue that is being generated by my products, right? And that would be, you know, measured as pleasure and happiness. And finally, we do ignore minority. We do ignore groups that are somewhat powerless. So if you're looking at the children, for example, they are weak. They cannot demand for wages. So we ignore their pleasure and happiness. The animals cannot talk, cannot tell you their feeling of being, their sufferings. So they are ignored. Okay. So there are, utilitarianism perhaps is an easy approach to take, and us in business and particularly in accounting, we are quite familiar with utilitarianism, looking at cost-benefit analysis, but it has got its weaknesses because we may be biased and we may be looking at things from a certain perspective. So in accounting, we are always looking at it from a monetary perspective. But there are much more, when you talk about ethics and morality, perhaps it goes beyond a monetary measurement, and we are talking about feelings, we are talking about, in terms of children, for example, is their future, the hope in children, but these are all very difficult to be quantified. Another example of a consequentialist theory would be egoism. And egoism perhaps is the opposite of utilitarianism, in the sense that we are looking more into our own self-interest. What would benefit us the most, ourselves, would be the right thing to do. Okay, what egoism ignores would be altruism, right? That there are many people around us that actually would like to do things for other people. We don't always want to consider our own self-interest. Many of us are selfless. We rather sacrifice our time to help others. So egoism ignores altruism. It ignores the other because it wants to maximize our own enjoyment, our own happiness. And it therefore ignores blatantly wrong things. So you may want to harm somebody as long as it benefits you, right? But as a moral and ethical behavior value, to harm someone else is not the right thing to do. Okay, so in a case of employees, for example, so many companies may view employees as just a resource and that you can utilize in order to maximize our own self-interest, all right, our own profitability, because self-interest can also be self-interest of the company, that we want to maximize the self-interest and the profitability of the company. So we want to save costs in terms of how we treat our employees. So they don't really need that much of a housing, all right? Just give them the bare minimum so that it saves us costs. We make the most benefit. We maximize our own self-interest, our owner's self-interest, maybe the shareholder's self-interest, right? So that's egoism, but again, there are flaws in egoism as well. Now let's look at non-consequentialist theories. Non-consequentialist theories are theories that looks at the motivation and the intention of the actions, and we tend to ignore the outcome and the impact of our actions. The first non-consequentialist theories we want to look at is the ethics of duties. Okay, and what the ethics of duties say is that actions must be guided by some sort of universal principles of what is right or wrong, not necessarily related to the consequence of that action. Right, and an action is right, okay, if it is linked to a duty that we are performing, and not so much the reward. So in ethics of duties, okay, we are looking at us as human beings and what are our duties as human beings. And this theory is mainly referring to what the one particular philosopher, his name is Immanuel Kant, has come up with this theory. And Immanuel Kant looks at people as independent and rational moral actors. That means to say that each one of us have got a moral good in all of us, and we can rationalize out this moral behavior, and we will arrive at this idea that we have a duty to others, and we will perform this duty willingly, not for any rewards of any kind. And Immanuel Kant came up with this universal principle called the categorical imperative. What is the categorical imperative? Now, the categorical imperative prescribes, like I said just now, a framework of universal principles. And this framework of universal principles comprise of three main maxims or principles. They are the maxim of consistency, the maxim of human dignity, and the maxim of universality. Okay, so let's discuss this in the case of an example, maybe an extreme example called are we allowed to kill? Should we have a gun that we can use to shoot someone if so can we hold guns? Can we can we use it to kill someone else? Now, so if we are a moral actor and if we are a rational person, we will be thinking in terms of number one, consistency. So if we are allowed to hold a gun and shoot someone, we should also allow others to hold the gun and shoot someone. Okay, and then you imagine what will happen is if everyone has a gun and or a weapon, and everyone can shoot the other person if they don't like or whatever, right? So how would this world be? Will this be something that is workable? That everyone then has a gun and they can kill anyone that they want. Okay, so if you think of this rationally, then having a gun and being allowed to kill anyone you like is not rational. It's not consistent. You will not be able to, consistently allow everybody to do it, because there will be chaos. The second principle is human dignity, right? In the sense that Kant is saying that we must always look at people not as a means to an end, but each one of us is an end to ourselves. That means each one of us has a right to be here. Each one of us is a valid person. Each one of us is valuable and important, and should be allowed to live, and should not be killed by anybody. We must not look at people as means to an end. We cannot use people. Okay, so that's the second maxim. And if you allow people to have a gun and to be able to shoot anyone and kill anyone, then you are looking at some other people as just means. All right, but you can't afford to kill someone, because each person's life is important. And the third maxim is universality, right? In the sense that will this be acceptable to everybody, right? And obviously that not everyone will agree with you that this is something that should be allowed, right? That everyone should be able to carry a gun or a weapon and to kill anyone that you like. So this is of course an extreme example, but this demonstrates the categorical imperative of Immanuel Kant. Okay, of course there are challenges, there are problems with these theories. Number one is, of course, it ignores outcomes. It ignores the consequence of our actions. Okay, and it is quite complex when you want to rationalize these things out. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I've given you an example that's perhaps easier to rationalize, but there are other cases where you will find more challenging to rationalize. And Immanuel Kant also has a very optimistic view of people, in the sense that each one of us are rational and we are able to rationally argue out what is our duties, right? But because some of us may not be able to do that so easily. So there are challenges with the Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, but this is a non-consequentialist theory that really looks at all of us having a duty to others. Another non-consequentialist theory is the ethics of rights, and this theory or this belief is that everyone on earth has a basic inalienable entitlement to whatever rights that we have. Okay, so as it's somewhat similar to what Kant was saying, in the sense that all of us are ends. We are valid. We are human beings, and all of us have got rights that cannot be taken away by anyone. Inalienable entitlement means cannot be taken away by anyone. Okay, and again, similar to what is in the comics. Remember Spider-Man? It says where you have power comes with responsibility, rights comes with duties. Okay, so if you recognize that everyone has a right, then you recognize that you will have a duty to preserve the rights of each of the other people. And this is embraced by the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, whereby countries come together and agree that every human being on this world have certain rights: a right to freedom, right to education, right to clean water and all that. So these are the belief that every one of us has a right, inalienable right that cannot be taken away, and cannot be denied. And the final example of a non-consequentialist theory that I would like to discuss is the ethics of justice. Now, the ethics of justice really talks about the fact that we need to look at and treat others as fairly as possible. All right, that everyone should get what they deserve, irrespective of their standing, their position, or their stage in life. Okay, so everyone must have, should have a free treatment, and this comes from a philosophical thinking of John Rawls, which came up with a theory of justice. Now, and in this theory, because it's very difficult for people to be, to look and try to be fair to everyone. All right, saying that we need to treat others fairly is not an easy thing to do, because we are always, prejudiced. We are always biased. We are always, covered or distracted by our own prejudices, our own values, right, and our own stage in life. So what John Rawls was saying is, in order for you to be fair, in order for you to treat others in a fair manner, then you need to put on what is called the veil of ignorance. You must ignore all the biasness. You must ignore the fact that, that family comes from a very, very poor family, right? And or that family comes from comes from a rich family or whatever. So you must not take the people's background, stage in life into account. If you were to treat people fairly, you need to ignore their circumstances in that sense, right? So that's the ethics of justice, and that would be the final example of a non-consequentialist theory that we want to talk about. So in summary, what we can say is that each of these theories that we've just discussed, they have a point of view. They have the advantages. They have the right arguments, right? Whether you should look at things in terms of consequences, but you should also look at the motivation and the intention as well. So consequentialist theories have got its arguments. Non-consequentialist theories also have got its arguments. So no one theory is the best. No one theory is correct in any way, but it's one way of looking at things. It's one approach to look at things. So, when we look at problems, when we look at ethical issues, we probably need to consider all these ethical theories and look at things from different perspectives and arrive at a most appropriate decision that will try as best as we can to satisfy all the different perspectives out there. Okay, and these theories are all complementary, right? So there are overlaps. Okay, so when you look at these theories, you shouldn't look at these theories as mutually exclusive theories. And therefore, the conclusion here is that in looking at some of the ethical decisions that companies are making, perhaps it would be better to adopt an ethical pluralistic view that we take into account all these different perspectives to arrive at the best possible solution for any business activity or challenge that we have. So I hope this video has been useful for you to understand a little bit more on what are business ethics, what is the importance of business ethics, and why we should know business ethics, and how can we use ethical theories in some of the decision making that we will need to make as business leaders, as an accountant. So thank you for watching this video, and till my next video, please do take care and stay safe.